Insight from Ukraine and Russia is back, this time with even more intercepts from the front lines. We're going to get a look at just how well it pays to be a Russian soldier on the front lines. Fun fact, it's probably not much. Let's get into it. As always, guys, you guys know Insight. I'm a huge fan of his channel. Love his content. And I always support it. You guys should too. I always link to it in the description. It's tough out there being a Ukraine content creator, certainly. Let's see if I can get myself where you guys can still see him and still see me and not block too much of the screen. Let's get into it.
The fresh interceptions from the eastern part of Ukraine. And in the first one, you'll hear two soldiers sharing the news. Let's go.
Ну, этот парень, который он штурмовиком, он говорит, где-то там криминал, то ли там, ну, где-то там, говорит. И говорит, что-то 90 и с чем-то человек, там какую-то, говорит, брали, если, говорит, 6 человек живых всего.
Okay, all right. Let's talk about what he's describing. So an assault trooper is a term in Russian military doctrine in this war for a light infantry soldier whose role is to conduct a frontal assault. These are selected troops, usually conscripts or mobilized soldiers with minimal to no training. And because they have such little training, they're unable to be given complex missions. And so usually it involves advancing straight towards a target, something that you can do with just weapons training and some basic first aid. They're supported, the assault troops, by the other enablers of the assault detachment. These are mortars, artillery, sometimes tanks or BMPs, thermobaric rocket forces, sometimes even things like smoke and other specialty forces and drones. The idea, of course, is that these highly trained soldiers are more valuable to the war effort than low-skill infantry. And as such, the highly trained soldiers are kept in support roles where they're less likely to become casualties, while the assault troops are in high attrition roles. And this 90 soldiers on an assault mission, 6 coming back, is actually not that different. And he describes it near Crimea. So for context, Crimea is down, if we look to not quite the southern part of the front lines, but right at this border between Luhansk and Kharkiv provinces or oblasts, and here is Crimea. So you can see the front lines here. Russia has been pushing into this area, but as we'll see here, even looking back weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, you see that there is really minimal progress, a small amount of progress. He's probably describing maybe this region here, but you guys can see it's measured in less than a kilometer of net progress. You can see here 1 kilometer forming about an inch. And as we circle back and forward through the month, you can see we're talking about a rate of advance by either side of less than, I'd say, probably 100 meters a day. So something akin to extreme attritional warfare. But this is probably where the fighting he's describing is taking place. And you can see that, especially in regions like this one, where you have these linear windbreaks that form natural barriers where you can establish trench lines, they can be very hard to break, because even if there is fighting, let's say the Russian forces advance and try to seize this wood line, the soldiers, the Ukrainian forces in this line are going to use direct and indirect fire to provide cover, to repel the attack, and to prepare for a counterattack. So you literally have to assault, seize, prep, assault, seize. You have to do these 4 boom, 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 boom advances in order to break their ability to provide fire support. It's why you have a what would that be? A 92% attrition rate, right? Six remaining of 90.
Они отправили, и по краям и спереди нас стоит, у нас с боков как 6 человек всего успели выскочить, все как положительно.
Okay, Ukrainians were in front of them and on the sides. Wait, we may be able to tease this out. Yeah, I kind of suspect this let's see. If it's not here, it could also have been an advance in this direction. This would be why it would be seen as such a terrible mission, because as a general rule, the areas where you see water are almost always low ground in a map, right? So even if you don't have terrain lines, you can be reasonably certain that the water formations represent local low areas. And so this is low ground. You can suspect that it's probably somewhat more elevated on this side and on this side. So imagine you're tasked to take something like one of these areas here. Ukrainian forces are going to be looking down on you from at least here and probably across the Donetsk, right? So they're going to be able to, even if they can't engage you with small arms, if this is elevated and they're looking down into this water here, they're going to be able to precisely target you with mortars and drones. It's going to be a disaster. And you can't get to them because they're protected behind this river. So you have no choice. It's a shooting gallery. As the Ukraine-Russia war drags on, we're going to see more and more Russian hackers find ways to monetize their nefarious skills. And unfortunately, unsuspecting internet users like you and I are their prime targets. Our browsers contain tons of personal data. They stay logged into our emails, our YouTube accounts, even financial stuff like PayPal is oftentimes just a click away. If someone could get access to our browser, it could be disastrous. That's why I wanted to talk about today's sponsor, Guardio. Guardio is a browser extension that acts as your first line of defense, detecting and blocking threats before they reach your browser. Guardio not only relies on standard blacklists, but they've developed in-house custom technology to detect phishing and other harmful sites. Guardio instantly blocks known tech support scams, crypto scams, shopping scams, and more. Guardio also automatically detects malicious extensions, malware that can masquerade as legitimate browser extensions, or even be installed surreptitiously on your browser. Guardio scans your device, removes them, and can even alert you before they ever get onto your device. Guardio blocks dangerous downloads, redirects search hijacking, provides information leak monitoring, cleans up harmful pop-ups. One Guardio account covers up to 5 users. You can scan your browser for threats for free by visiting guard.io/combat. And when you install the extension, you'll get a free 7-day trial of premium features like real-time threat removal. So if you want a clean and secure browsing experience, go again to guard.io/combat. Link is in the description, and you can check out their affordable premium plan for full protection. And that's where I suspect this fighting took place. That's what he's describing. Near Crimea, where there's known to be fighting, and Ukrainians on 3 sides.
Если командир еще тупорылый, говорит, ему это объясняешь так, вот он ему
тут по телефону ничего рассказывать не буду, потом так расскажу. Тут
да понятно,
тут что творится.
Ну, да я понимаю.
Просто.
Yeah, the reason why he says the commanders, he describes them as dumb, and there's some evidence that that's true, that the Russian military command does not produce very tactically aware officers. The other problem is that when you have low skill light infantry, they can't do much beyond conduct frontal assaults. And if you do not have time to train them in more advanced skills, because remember, let's say you want to have U.S. style infantry who can execute tactical maneuvers, right? They can do things like a squad attack, they can do a flank, they can do a passage of lines, they can do a support by fire, they can establish overwatch, they can do a route reconnaissance, an area reconnaissance, they can do a movement to contact. They can operate as part of a independent squad, as part of a platoon, as part of a company. Those are skills, not just for the individual soldier who has to be able to, use their individual weapon, individual movement techniques, provide buddy aid, receive orders, plot their location on a map, communicate, receive orders, adjust fire, right? They need a variety of skills. Communicate over the radio. That's the baseline to be able to be an advanced, a fully trained infantryman to the NATO standard. You then need a team leader who understands how to emplace a machine gun, how to assign a sector of fire, how to plot a TRP, how to call for fire. You need a squad leader who knows how to do everything the light infantryman does, everything the team leader does, plus things like forecast logistics needs, assess the level of equipment, determine the burn rate, determine a schedule for a sleep work schedule, track water usage of his or her squad, right? So you get into more advanced stuff. Then you end up with things like you need a platoon leader who is capable of trained to coordinate, right? Plan, write a 5-paragraph op or prepare a logistics plan, forecast logistical and tactical needs. You have to understand operationally how their movement is going to go from start to finish, in addition to all those subordinate skills. So you see how time intensive it is to produce a high-level infantryman. If you don't have that, again, what you can produce is a very low-level infantryman who can advance in a singular direction. So you could get a few hours of training with a compass, a few hours of training with their individual weapon, and a few hours of training with on individual movement techniques. And that's about it, right? So you can produce that. The problem is when you have this low skill infantryman, they're going to take a lot of casualties, which means that you will rarely have someone who lasts long enough to become a team leader with all the requisite skills. It'll be even more rare to have a team leader last long enough to become a squad leader of any competence, right? So you see how you can't count on these formations to have the leadership necessary to execute advanced combat tasks. So even if you maybe have one of these mobilized soldiers who's a little smarter than the others, because their missions are always so dangerous, it becomes this. You see how it becomes a negative cycle where you don't have a lot of skills. You get these missions where you take a lot of casualties. You're unable to gain valuable experience and cohesion and become just smarter about your combat tactics, right? Learning the hard way. You don't last long enough to learn the hard way or the easy way being what you learn in training. And so it doesn't matter that one is smarter than the other. They're not going to last long enough for it to meaningfully change the way you employ them. So the only thing they can do is march like a zombie towards the enemy. And so the commanders aren't dumb. They're using what they have to the best of their ability, which is to say, not that you don't have that many good options. If you can think of a better way to use to seize an objective when 90% of your soldiers are trained only to advance and fire, I'm all ears. But we've all played real-time strategy games, and that's basically it.
Все красиво и пушисто.
Да, там вообще красиво все. Все, мы слушаем и смеемся каждый день.
Да я сейчас так, когда передают, там где-то посмотрю, что там творится. Там что-то в последнее время там жопа какая-то была. Говорит.
Ну, сюда под Красный Лиман стягивали. Да,
в Красном передали что-то.
Yeah, this is fascinating because, again, one of the things that we've seen over the last maybe 60 to 90 days has been that Russian media outlets and prominent figures within the Russian media have become increasingly critical of the war. Prigozhin is, of course, leading the charge. He's the head of the Wagner Group. He has a lot of institutional power and literal power. He literally commands a lot of people with guns. And so he is freed to be very critical of the Kremlin and very critical of the Russian Ministry of Defense and very critical of the Russian state bureaucracy, who sometimes he acknowledges are taking massive casualties and lying to the public in a weird turn of events, right? He's suddenly a bastion of truth. But others have too. Members of the Russian State Duma have recently acknowledged that the special operation has failed to achieve its stated objectives. Some even Russian political commentators acknowledge that Russia doesn't appear to have a chance against a NATO-equipped force like Ukraine. All of these things, sometimes they are these people are allowed to exist in Russian state media as a foil, right? Sort of like the way, if you are, let's say, a right-wing media outlet, you won't find an intelligent, articulate, reasonable person to represent the other political side. You'll find the other side's version of a crackpot. You'll find some crazy person who's kind of an idiot, and you'll bring them on as a representative of the opposite side. And so Russian media will certainly do that. They'll bring on straw men who make these extremely low sophistication arguments, just so that the Russian nationalists can take them down and prove them wrong. But more and more, these are respected people of esteem who are voicing these concerns, and they aren't necessarily just being used as stooges.
Силы растягивают, когда хотят там прорыв делать, думаю, себе как раз и ты там.
Да, немцы по лесу бригадами разделились, ДРГшники, и сейчас вот на углу пацанов вырезали на днях ночью.
В смысле? Да ты что?
Да, да, минометчиков.
So it's interesting. They are saying that Ukrainian forces, again, able to operate at night, just a few hundred meters from mortars. And this is one of the problems, again, that Russian forces have talked about very publicly, is that they lack night vision devices. And if you have a drone that can view with a thermal or night vision sight, if you have even just a good observation post with one thermal sight, you can get the information on where your enemy is and how you can best target them. I'm going to actually see if we can get a terrain map of the Crimea Lyman region, because it's very, very hilly. There's a lot of significant elevation changes. So let's see if we can switch this over here. Actually, I think I can do it here. Let me see if I can activate a topographic map. Okay, so there's all right, here, I'll show you. So here's a topographic map. You can see I was hoping for contour lines. They don't really have it. But you guys can see that there's a lot of commanding heights here where you can look down. If you have, again, you can see there's like a hill here, a hill here. Imagine you're Ukrainian forces and you sit on this hill looking out across this valley. You have thermal sights or you have night vision. You might be able to easily triangulate Russian troop movements and continually, day and night, put mortars onto these locations. So it's really, you should understand that when you have some of these technological enablers, there's a reason the U.S. defense budget is massive. It's because if you have the technology, you can turn even a pretty numerically even fight into an absolute slaughter. And again, 12 hours a day, Russian soldiers are blind because it's dark, and in those same 12 hours, Ukrainian soldiers, let's say even 1 in 10, they can still fire mortars, they can guide artillery, they can do a lot.
Метров, наверное, от нас.
И не спали, наверное, не видели.
Весь блиндаж. Ходит там снайпер, у них в бригаде пришлепали.
Again, if you guys have been on the Combat Vet News, my site, I do breakdowns of this. We've seen a lot of Ukrainian sharpshooters and snipers using thermal scopes to operate at night. It's very, very hard. And for a force without night vision to do anything at night, and it's so hard to counter an enemy that has good night vision devices. It's almost impossible. There's a reason why even in Afghanistan, you would see the Rangers or the SEALs or Delta Force, they operated on basically an inverted schedule. They would sleep all day, and they would run missions at night, simply because it was such a tremendous advantage for them. If they're going to go and they're going to confront the enemy, why would they not do so at a time where the enemy was blind and they could see?
Может, кончилось бы уже скорее.
Да, ну, это не скоро кончится. Тут просто Не та война. У нас пацаны все, которые чуть не были тут, народу говорят, куда мы попали, быстрее бы домой и все.
You know, it's bad when even people in Chechnya say this is a waste of time. And the reason is Chechnya was famous for actually the deplorable conditions Russian soldiers were sent there in. It was common for Russian soldiers to sell their ammunition, to even sell their weapons for food and vodka. You would often see Russian soldiers in Chechnya who would report having fleas because conditions were simply so filthy.
Больше приедет. Они вот, такая война, сверху летят, скидывают воки. Все, тут заступаешь вечером на небо, на голову не опускаешь. Они даже эти дроны камикадзе, он просто летит, тепло увидел точку.
Yep, this is what we're talking about. Even they recognize when they say spot worm objects, what they're describing is a drone with a thermal sight. It detects body heat or the engine block of a vehicle and will fly towards them and function as a miniature cruise missile.
It's not the first time I've heard about Krymina and Liman in the recent interceptions. Could it be the start of the new Ukrainian offensive? I don't know. We'll see. And now let's listen to another Russian soldier who's serving in the 15th Motor Rifle Brigade. Let's go.
Не, ну так мы же тоже сюда заезжали, меняли целиком. Все заехали и все уехали. Ну, Путин когда полгода. Ну, а если здесь так он будет делать, мы-то здесь как потеряшки, у нас командование, все другое. У нас здесь добровольцы полгода 20 тысяч зарплаты получили, и прокуратура разбирается, разобраться не могут.
All right, 2,000 rubles, guys. Let's do a quick ruble to USD. So let's see. Sorry, 20,000 rubles. Oh, come on. We can do it. We can do it. Ooh, 6 months of work, $246. Let's see. Let's just look up average rent in Russia. So how many months of rent does that cover you? It's 2 weeks of rent. Right. That's in a city center. If you the Russian suburbs, it will cover actually 1 month of rent. So 1 month of rent in the Russian suburbs. That's what they are earning. That to calibrate it here. Actually, let's see. Let's calibrate it to the U.S. Right. Average rent in USA, baby. In the U.S. of A, $1,700. So yeah, that's the equivalent of getting about $1,700 for 6 months of work in the United States of America. Whew.
Везде в этом за лентой сидят, водку пьют. Народу там много, повести есть кого просто да. Зависит от командования, не заморачиваются. Сказали сидите до конца, да. Все. Должны вообще каждые 2 месяца переодевать. Мы полгода в своей кукле находим. Я тебе и говорю, что ты все равно тебя там должны переодеть.
I love this. I love this level of delusion. But they have to. But they have to. Well, here's the thing. Who's going to make them? You have to remember, and people don't understand this about governments. The rule, when this is universally true, and it's true in the United States, don't kid yourself. Like, if no one's there to make the government follow the rules, then the rules don't apply to the government. They only apply to you. This is how power works, right? If you have the power and the leverage to not be to be more powerful than the people who enforce the rules, then the rules don't apply. And again, this isn't like a political statement per se. This is enabling you to understand the way our world has always worked, right? It's very simple. This is why ancient Babylonian kings got to do things that regular Babylonian farmers could never do. It's because when you have the power, you make the rules. And this is the most boomer shit of like, well, it's not supposed to be that way. It's supposed to be some other way. Well, you know, sorry, it's just like, you got a case of the spostas. Like, yeah, things are supposed to be more fair, but they're not. This is the way the world works. This is what happens when you have an authoritarian state, especially, right? Sometimes, again, in the US, we have a really good system of a relatively independent judiciary who actually does. A judge has the power. A federal judge can sit there and be like, no, the government was wrong and it will pay you, the common citizen. But in historic terms, the idea that a common citizen can get a fair hearing and that someone can actually coerce the government to pay up is unthinkable, right? To a Russian, it's unthinkable. The idea that the government can actually be forced to pay up when they really don't want to.
Дать новую робу.
Не, ну мы видишь, мы просто попали в такую 15, которая она миротворцы, ее расстреляли всю полностью. Нами забили ее, хотели расформировать, нами забили, ее не расформировали. Поэтому мы и сидим.
20,000 rubles is about $250. At this point, Russian army just sounds like a life-threatening scam. Anyway, thanks for watching and for your support.
Yeah, as always, guys, be sure to check him out. Give him a like. He's putting out great content here. Insight's really crushing it. And definitely support him. And thanks again to our sponsor. I appreciate you guys and have a good one. I'll see you in the next one.